Welcome to Koffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person.
Dan, I got to tell you, I can't imagine how many times you've actually said to me, "Oh, David, you don't ask anything about me. You don't care about me. You have no love for me. It's just one-sided relationship." So, Dan, towards that end, I would like to start today by asking you a question. Have you had any formal education, my friend?
Oh, yeah, I went to secondary school and then did sixth form, so I had formal education until I was 18.
And Dan, did you do that in which country did you do that? Because I think that's always important when you're, comparing standards of education to know which country you actually did that in.
I did that in the UK, in England.
All right, Dan. So that's a caveat, and I'm sorry for that. Dan, would you like to tell us what you know about? Did you study economics? Let me start there.
No, I think I did an AS level in business, so the very, very basics of business, but I didn't study economics.
All right. Well, Dan, I think that you, just because of who you are, didn't need to actually study it to understand that there's certain principles in economics. Would you like to describe for our audience the whole concept of supply and demand?
Well, I mean, it's basically if the supply outweighs the demand, the price is going to go down. If the demand outweighs the supply, the price is going to go up at the absolute most basic level.
And that's a great level, Dan, because you know what? If we don't start at the basic level, where are we going to go from there, right? So let's take that level today. Let's discuss demand. I want to talk about demand because you and I were talking about something earlier today. When someone sent me something to do with some cards that apparently weren't issued, weren't supposed to be issued, or something. And I'm going to have you put the pictures on the screen, but they're basically a Lost World, a Lost Remover, and a Twins player reward promos. Could you talk briefly about those cards before we get into the demand part of that?
Yeah, so it's a weird set because it's a set of three cards that have the player reward style from the Heart Gold Soul Silver era, but they were never listed on a checklist or anything. And the first we knew about it, I think we've mentioned this on the podcast before a while back, but at NAIC a couple of years ago, TPCI provided a trade binder for a trade event, and they just filled it with random old promos and stuff. And people went along. You paid $5, you opened a pack, and you could trade any card from the pack or any card you had in your collection for anything from the binder. It was just a bit of fun. It's supposed to be for the kids to just get to do a trade or something. And there was a Lost World promo in there, and that was the first one documented. Like, people were talking about it and insisted, "Oh, it must have been a player rewards promo. Oh, I know this was a player rewards promo." When that Lost World first happened, I spent the best part of a week on PokeGym. I read through hundreds of threads trying to find documentation on that card being given out, because I wasn't just reading news threads, I wasn't just reading threads about player rewards, I was reading trade threads. I was searching up the words Lost World. I was reading through just people's wants list, people's haves list from, you know, 2013, 2014, whenever it would have been, maybe a bit earlier than actually, about 2011. And I couldn't find anyone saying they had the card or that they were looking for the card. I couldn't find anything. As I've said, and I will say this again on here, I would love to be proven wrong on this. If someone can find me anything from Pokemon or from an old forum that shows these three cards were given out back in the day in large quantities, let me know. But then later on, a couple more copies of Lost World popped up. I spoke to one other player who had one, who said that they were sure they got it from Player Rewards back in the day. And then a store posted that they had. These are the same photos. I don't know if it's the same owner that has them, but these are the same photos we got probably a year ago at this point. Two Lost Worlds, a Lost Remover, and a Twins, which would kind of make sense for the step 1, 2, 3 of the different tiers of player rewards. Now, I could see it being possible if Lost World was like a tier 3 promo, it just potentially falling under the radar a bit, and maybe there being some documentation I just haven't found. But if these were tiers 1, 2, and 3, 1 and 2 would have been given out in such big numbers that they would be out there. They just would be. But I also looked everywhere that I could find, and I found the discussions of when the actual system changed to being tiered. So I have all of the lists of exactly what was the first one on the tiered system and everything, and nothing matched up. The basics are, when we saw those four cards with that buyer or with that store a year and a half ago, I think, you made an offer on them because let's say for Twins and Lost Remover, these were the only ones we'd ever seen.
Okay, let me just, I just want to cut in so we can do a little summary and then
Sure.
you can continue. So before we continue, I want you guys to know what we're going to talk about in this video and how it all comes together. So we're going to talk about demand, and we're going to talk about the importance of demand with respect to pricing. And that's what Dan's going to get into right now. We're also going to talk about a collection update, what's going on with the selling of my collection and relative to demand, because that's important. It's another component of pricing and who's coming available and who wants it and that kind of thing. We're going to talk about a surprise discovery in the hobby over the last week or two that I think you'll find very interesting. And then we're going to conclude. I really want to hear about Dan's experience at the show. We passed over that about a week or so ago when he went to the show. So this concept right now, this discussion, we're going back to demand before we get into the specifics. I've got 3 specific examples that I want to talk about. Dan's talking about these promos right now that were really never formally issued. And he's going to talk about this concept of people thinking things are worth huge amounts of money just because of their rarity, the supply, when there isn't commensurate demand. Okay, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, so where we were at is you made an offer on them, it didn't go through, and then during the fact that these were posted on like Reddit and stuff, so they got a little bit of attention, and that drew at least one more copy of Twins came out of the woodwork. It was someone who, again, they said they'd received one back in the day, so it seems like what happened is that these were potentially made, printed up for a full release, and either a very, very tiny number of people, potentially, one area of the US or something, got these instead of something else, or just a couple got sent out by mistake. This person has actually just been playing the copy of Twins in their cube for years. It was just sleeved up in their cube. And we did manage to make a deal on that one. So you do have a copy of the Twins. It's slightly played, so if you can get these better copies, that would be nice. But that's where they currently sit.
So explain, what did that store owner ask roughly? What did they want for their cards? What did this crazy person believe that these cards were going to be worth because they were so rare?
Well, so I'll start off with our offers. Initially, I think we had said,
well, I don't think you should talk about our offers, just because.
Okay, I was just going to do it to show how much of a gap we were actually.
Yes, no sweat. I don't really want to reveal that. That's okay. But I do want to talk about the craziness of people when they think they've got gold.
Yeah, so the store owner, I spoke to the store owner directly because I'd reached out to someone via Reddit and he put me in touch with the store owner. The store owner asked me for a bit of information on them, and I gave that history. I did say the one thing is, if there's one of these out there, there's 10,000 of them printed, but just in a warehouse somewhere. Maybe not 10,000, maybe about 1,000 in a warehouse somewhere. We know that because of the one copy of Lost World that was given out at NAIC by Pokemon. We know that Pokemon TPCI has copies of these just sitting around. And he came back, and basically his idea was he was going to get them graded. He had the new Holy Grail on his hands, and he asked $50,000 for the set of 4. So $12,500 per card. And basically at that point, we just kind of stopped any kind of negotiation. I mean, at one point I said, when he mentioned grading, I said, well, the person I'm talking on behalf of, which is you, I said, his offer's not going to change whether they're graded or not. I said, I think they're a niche item. I said, meaning you, he is the person most likely to actually want to buy these. I think he will give you the best price. So grading, I don't think matters. I think he's going to lose money by grading because it's not going to help it at all. But he basically just believed he had the next big thing. And here we are, say, a year on, and it's the same photographs that are circulating. So
let me explain. So this morning I got something sent to me, guys, that basically said, hey, can you tell me about these cards? They're the same photos that were circulating before. I can't find information on them anywhere. And I just went ahead and told the person exactly what Dan just said. So that's the reason we bring it up, because it's this circulation of cards that are still out there, have not been sold. Somebody thinks they're worth $1 million and they're not, because there's not the demand. Dan, I need you to talk about real quick about who would have demand for these, because you need to explain to the audience how few people have demand. Who's going to want to collect these cards?
So there's a couple of categories of people who might want these. There's people who like the Heart Gold Soul Silver era. They are from the Heart Gold Soul Silver era, so people who really like that era. Maybe if someone's trying to, master set that era, like we say, not many people master set, but there are probably a couple of people doing it. People who like player reward promos or just reward promos, league promos, that kind of thing. There's been a lot of those through the years, so there'll be people who collect, just those. Or there will be people who just want every English card. Like, you would be the demand for that. I'd be the demand for that. So, I don't think there's not zero demand for these cards outside of you. But it's a small group, because the big thing that pushes a demand on a lot of cards is artwork. And people talk about it with staff stamps and stuff all the time. We talked about staff cards kind of declining in price because there's more options for rarer cards and stuff to be bought with new artwork. These cards are just a card from a set with a new foil version. So that cuts the desirability for a lot of people. They kind of fall into that market of, if these were printed everywhere, if these were $10, $20 cards that you could get easily on demand at all times, there'd probably be a lot more people interested in them. But because the price is a bit higher, as soon as the price goes up even a little bit, even if the price was passing the $50, $100 mark, that cuts off probably 95% of the people at least who would want these, just because to a lot of people it's one of those things of, oh, that looks nice, but I'm not going to pay that for it,
So Dan, you talk about the artwork as being a critical demand factor, but I think personally that the most important factor in all of this is character collecting. And it's not, I mean, again, it's just one of the real typical things. And so because these are not real characters, I mean, yes, they might have something in the artwork, but generally they're more like these trainer type of cards. I think that end up, cutting off that demand as well. So I want to move to number 2 because I don't want to get through this. So, but I think it's important to note, folks, that demand is really, it's not supply. That's the misunderstanding that so many people have in this hobby. Okay, it's really limited, and so it's worth a fortune. No, there still has to be a demand. Even my pre-release writes you, if there's no demand for it, it could be the most limited thing in the world. It doesn't matter. Someone has to want it. Enough people have to want it to warrant a price that's reasonable. So, number 2 example. Recently, I did a post and it dealt with the distributor promos, Piplup and Turtwig. I didn't have the Munchlax in that particular post. So I think people would be surprised. I don't know if it's ever been formally announced. A lot of people have sent me messages questioning, hey, what happened with that stuff? The Turtwig sold for $5,600 and the Piplup sold for $5,000. Now, a lot of you might think these are still worth the $2,000 or $2,500 or $3,000 they were always worth. That indication of appreciation in prices illustrates the demand for those character collectors. And that's what people came to me and said. And by the way, the most hot one that people wanted, the most in demand was Turtwig. And I don't know anything about these characters, so it's kind of surprising. But I had actually more people that probably would have bid even higher had it gone out there even longer. So this is an example of limited cards, only whatever there are, 6 or 10 or 12 or whatever out there, and people actually having enough of a demand to put them in their collection to where those prices go up above just a couple of $1,000s. Okay, last example, because Dan will talk more about this one. We've talked about all this stuff before. I guess we call them the Professor Promo Plaque cards. And so these are these we've done Coffee Talks on this before, but this would be these 8 card sets that come on a plaque to honor these professors that have done good work for Pokemon. And maybe they issue 5 or 6 in a particular year for 3 years or so. And there's been now a second version of them issued as well. And hopefully Dan will have pictures of all of this stuff on the screen so you can look at them.
Yeah.
So again, people came out and, they would contact me specifically and say, David, I've got a set of this from last year or whatever. And, I'm looking for $400,000 or something crazy. And the whole thing is, yes, they're very limited. Yes, they're very beautiful. Yes, not a lot of professors are going to necessarily sell them. But who is buying these cards? And that's the issue. If you just have a few people looking for them, in all my time of dealing with these cards, I've only had 3 or 4 people even reach out looking for them.
Right.
So of course, if you bring down that price, yeah, if you say, hey, it's $1,000 for 8 cards or something, but this is a set that's typically 40, 50,000, something like that, depending if you're, looking at a public market for anything. So it's a lot of money. And so if you think you have gold again and you're looking to, monetize, you're sadly mistaken if there's not commensurate demand.
Sure. And like when you say only a few people have reached out to you about those cards, I know because we talked about it on about a few episodes ago if it happened, one person who reached out was not even interested in a full set. It was the person who was building an Obsidian Flames master set, and one of the cards from that plaque is from Obsidian Flames. So they reached out because they would have been interested in buying that one card from the plaque. Probably because they know they couldn't afford the whole plaque. If they really like Obsidian Flames, they're collecting it. If it's a couple of $1,000s a card, they might be able to justify it as it's the last card I need for the set. I could do that once, but I'm not buying the whole set. The same as there's a card in that set in the second plaque, which is Kofu from Stellar Crown. Now, Stellar Crown isn't a very popular set, but I love Stellar Crown because it introduces Terapagos, one of my new favorites. So I'm working on putting together Stellar Crown, and that was one of the reasons I bought the Terapagos trophy level card from Asia, was because it was Stellar Crown and I wanted to finish that set. So in future, if I get the chance to get a Kofu from that plaque, yeah, I might be willing to pay a good amount of money or a market level amount of money for the Kofu, but I know I couldn't afford the whole plaque, or I couldn't afford all 8 cards. It might end up having to be, if someone was selling them, you find 8 people each who want one card, maybe is what it has to come down to. But the demand to hit that level of pricing that these sell for, like you say again, is very, very limited because they are trainer cards, which some people like the trainer characters. Like I think in the second one, there's an Iono in there, and a lot of people like Iono as a character, like comparative to other trainers. But it's another one where you have to look at what the first ones were actually selling for. Like it was this second plaque where I think we got offered one, and they wanted $400,000. And we had to say, I mean, look, the first plaque that went out for 3 years, the ones that sold were, what was it, 20 to 50, I think was about the range on where they were at. With the first plaque, you got yours, but then you had people approaching you trying to sell it. And that's how it is. Like when you look at stuff like the trophy cards, even the like champion stamped cards from ICs, we're always the ones chasing the winners because we want to be buying those. The winners get more power, With things like this, it has like in a lot of Professor stuff, out with the exception of the Voltorb from 151 because it's a 151 card. I have way more professors speaking to me saying, "Can you help me sell my Professor stuff?" than I have people saying, "Help me buy Professor stuff." It's just the way it is. That stuff, the sellers have no power in the situation. It all comes down to how can we find a buyer.
Well, and the other part of all this has to do with how many sets like that, and just sticking with the Professor promo for a minute, the plaques, how many people are willing to break them up, because that's few and far between. And the example I had recently is talking about the Tropical Mega Battle set, the English one that I've got from, back in 2001, 2002. And so somebody asked me, David, can you tell me about the Bruno's Hitmonchan? I'd like to Hitmonchan or whatever. I'd like to see if I can acquire that. What's going to cost me someday? Will I ever be able to find it? And I said, in all the time that I've known about that set, I've known of only 2 of those sets ever being broken up to be sold as singles. And I'm not sure exactly how many there are. Some people say there may be, 12 total of the English. It ranges. It really isn't that important. There's not a lot.
Yeah.
And you take a big risk, unless you're buying with a conglomerate of people that are willing to take on a portion of that risk when you're buying a $200,000 set or more, for it's 30 cards, but 10 of them are energies, give or take. So, each card is an average of 10,000. Now there's a couple cards that are more demand than others. So it isn't that simple because these rare type of card sets, there's a lot more risk in breaking them up. And so you don't see that as often as well, especially with limited quantities. And when people can look back and say, well, the set's already sold for a couple of 100,000, there's no reason for me to break it up. I know there'll be a buyer for it, despite its very limited supply. So yeah, just interesting, because I want to carry this topic into an update on the collection now. I know everybody, that wants to know how's it going as far as the sale of the collection. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I've already made it clear before that what everybody wants of the collection is the sealed material. So I'm going to reiterate that. I've got 5, 6, 7 people that say I'll buy the whole run of all your sealed material, and it's around $2 million, give or take, depending on how it all works out in the end. But I'm reluctant to do that, and still haven't done that, because I think that I like to make sure that people are incentivized to try to do more than just that. If they're going to get the carrot, what else are they going to buy along with it? So now we have the trophy cards as piece number 2 that everybody's kind of following in the social media. Price on that is $6 million. And I will just state for those that are interested, I've actually got, people that are working on it. I've probably got at least 2 solid leads, possibly 3, that are trying to raise capital, because as you folks know, people don't just have that kind of money sitting around in a bank account. They have to raise capital to go about trying to buy something. I have tried to find the right people that would be willing to keep it intact and want to keep it intact, and may look at it as museum quality or display quality altogether for many years to come. And so because of that, I'm trying to work with them on, so to speak, what I would call payment type plans. But still, someone has to come up with the initial deposit to do a payment plan. And that would be something like 50% down and maybe 50% to be paid monthly over 24 months, just to be transparent on what I'm looking for. And so I'm hopeful that that will allow, one of the people that I believe would actually be qualified and be able to keep it all together, to be able to act and bite and have an incentive to try to do something before someone else. So there's a little bit of competitive spirit in people that really want it. I definitely know, again, 2 people that have said this would be the most incredible thing to be able to carry on the legacy. And I really like when I hear that. Of course, there's no guarantees they're going to do that, but I truly believe the people I've talked to would do that going forward. And piece 3 of this whole thing is the singles and sets. And I think you guys will find this interesting. I've done a lot more of a deep dive in this over the last, week or 2. So the price on the singles and sets, which is kind of everything else in the collection, I would say 30,000, give or take, unique singles, again, roughly in that number, unique cards. And the price is $3.5 million. Again, if somebody were to come in and swoop in and try to buy all of this stuff, there is a discount for buying it all. But right now, as a piece, that's what it is, the price on those things, since some people have asked about that and wanted to know. And this includes everything from every single set and every single variant, which I'll talk about, to all of the unique items, like the Tropical Mega Battle set, and like the Ishihara, and like the Doug Ferguson, and like the sample set and the FPO set, and every single rare type of card, down to the one-of-a-kinds that are out there. Here's what I did this week, which Dan will find interesting. I don't think he's ever done this specific thing, but he's the motivation for doing something like this. I went through Bulbapedia and I created a spreadsheet. I'll have to give you access to it, Dan, so you can work through it with me. And I put on the spreadsheet every single variant card from every single set, so that this one spreadsheet has every Bulbapedia list, which isn't necessarily complete. It doesn't have the code cards and other things on there. But just to give you guys an idea, there were more than 2,500 variant cards alone, not included within the sets that we're talking about. Obviously, some of them are worth virtually nothing, and some of them are worth a ton. But it's interesting to understand the kind of time and labor and effort to find 2,500 additional cards that somebody would have to do if they were trying to do this. And I want to put this number in perspective, and I'm not doing a sales pitch because most of us don't have the resources to afford this, but it's just amazing. When you think of an Illustrator card or something on the Japanese side that's sold by some of these top influencers that still argue that there's 39 of them when we all know there's 80, 90, 100 or more. And that card might be 2 million or 3 million or 1 million. And you can talk about owning every single English language card without the trophies for 3.5 million. It's pretty impressive. In the sense that I didn't take these numbers and go and artificially inflate them and say like, oh, it's $10 million just because I can. trying to find the right person. I'm trying to do what's right for them and for me at the same time. And it's very interesting to see how that develops. I do have a couple of people that are working through with those numbers and trying to deal with it, but it was very much a surprise to me to see how many variants just in sheer numbers were out there when I put that spreadsheet together.
Yeah, and there's only a tiny number of variants that you still don't have. We're working through at the moment to try and just fill in some of those gaps. There's a couple that are going to be hard to get that you still don't have. There's a last couple of champions from ICs we're still in trying to negotiate with winners and stuff, but almost everything is there. It's all of the champions from like the DCE champions are all there. Those Asia Ultra Balls, you have three out of the four champions.
What is DCE?
Double colorless energy. It's from the evolution set.
Yeah.
You have all four champions of that, all four top 8s of that. Funnily, you have 3 staffs of that. I'm working on getting the 4th staff at the moment. I have someone who's looking at a collection at the moment for me. But you have the Asia Ultra Balls. You have 3 out of the 4 champions, which those are 1 of 1. Each one of those is 1 single copy ever for each of those 4 cards. And you have 3 out of the 4 of them. And the original winner still has his last one. It's the Malaysia winner is hanging on to his for now, but basically everything else is there. Prize packs, I'm currently putting together the last few pieces from sets 1, 2, and 3 of prize packs. You're done with set 4, and then I'm going to be working on 5 and 6 as well once I get through 1, 2, and 3. Any of the new variants that are coming out, I'm picking them up as and when I can grab them. I'm still building all that stuff up for you. It literally will be, I think we're maybe down to about, not counting the prize packs, which I said I'm still working on, we're down to maybe a dozen cards out of those, like you say, 2,700 or whatever, that you still need to get. And a lot of those, it's just the case of me finding the right person.
Well, and it's so amazing that how many of those, just as an example, there's some that are worth nothing and there's some that are worth quite a bit, as we know. And then there's some of these middle tier cards that, they really add up. You don't realize, like all of the ones from overseas, right? All of the special stamped variants of, I don't know, whatever it's called, game something instead of games stop
EB
or
games.
whatever. Yeah, CB games. And when you start going back year after year after year, they add up. There's several and for every set. So it really is, it's impressive, Dan, to the amount of work, and I appreciate all of your help to get here, just because it's been a labor of love and effort all the way through to be able to amass something like that. And people don't really get it, the visual vocal point of everything, or I should say focal, because I'm not singing. So say focal then. Okay, you missed up the word, you tried to correct yourself. Everybody can see you're a fool. Who are you talking to? I'm doing a podcast. Shut up over there. Sorry, Dan. The guys are chiming in. So the focal point being those trophy cards is where everybody focuses on. But boy, is it amazing when you look through everything else and really what's there. So thank you for all the time and effort and all of that.
There's a lot of stuff in there that you just don't see. There's I think it's from Platinum Base. There's a Comic Con Riolu. And I know this because I have a staff version as well. The amount of people, I've had more people, I think, over the last few years contact me trying to buy my staff Comic Con Riolu than I have trying to buy some of my world stuff. Because, again, that is one where, yeah, sure, the demand isn't as high as some of this other stuff, but the supply is 0 on the market for that Comic Con staff Riolu. They just never ever show up. It's like one every 2 or 3 years manages to pop onto the market. So there's all that kind of stuff where you have to just factor in not even just the raw value of the card, it's how often does this card show up.
And I just had someone, Dan, and I think I just said that to you. I asked you a question within the last week, what do you know about this or this card or whatever? And it's because somebody reached out to me, and a gentleman named Matt, I think, and he was asking about that card specifically, still looking for it. So it does show you there's a tangible demand for that kind of thing. And sometimes what makes that demand more, what increases that level of demand is the fact that those cards, while wanted by a lot of people, especially from the vintage era, they're they're thought to be more affordable, right? They're not expecting that card's going to be a several $1,000 card, while it might not be. I have no idea what it is. I'm not suggesting it is. I'm just saying that that would be a card you might have got for $2 or $3 or $4 or $500, which becomes affordable to a lot of people that are looking to fill in that one hole in a collection. So demand, I did want to say this, and I forgot to say it as I began to talk about the collection sale. I wanted to say that demand and supply, everything is relative to your financial resources as well. Because when I say that there's, not a lot of demand for my collection, what I really mean is there's not a lot of demand with people that have the financial resources. Sure, everybody would love to own the collection, but they don't have the resources. And you need both. Obviously, it's silly to think anything else. But I do want to say, for those that are watching, I'm going to say it every time because I've never been more impressed with a community. I have had the most incredible, I'm going to read one or two, not now, but I'm going to read one or two on a Coffee Talk. Some of the messages people have sent me are the most heartwarming things you've ever read in your life. And if those of you that have a heart, and I think so many of you do, just because of the kind greetings and positive greetings you've given me, and telling me that I've been a harbinger of good things for the hobby and tried to do my best and stuff, even defending me against that very once in a while troll, I can't imagine. Thank you. Thank you for all of the support, all of the understanding, all of the love, because to me, you guys will never know how much of a difference it makes. As I always say, decision is agonizing. I still go through it every day, still waiting for a domino to drop to see where this whole thing goes, still having to deal with the negotiations every day. But I just, want to say again, how honored I am to be a part of all of you and a part of this wonderful Pokemon hobby. Dan, I want you to talk about, if you are willing to talk about it. If not, I'm going to talk about it, so you get your chance to jump in. Can you tell our audience, which was the pretty incredible news about a card that came out over the last 7 to 14 days or so, that's being publicized in some of the forums as far as potentially being available? A surprise card that nobody would have ever thought at this point?
Don't know what you're talking about. Tell me what you're talking about, then I'll talk about it.
Okay. I'm talking about one of where there's only two in the world to be known before this. One owned by me and one owned by Rusty.
Oh, the Raichu. I did not know it was out on the forums now. Are people talking about it publicly?
Yeah, so there's been some talk about the fact that a card has come out that possibly maybe... So what happened is recently, it appears from what I've been able to garner through the grapevine, that more than one person, that's all I can say because I don't know how many, were potentially let go by the Pokemon card company. And so this is where pre-release Raichus have obviously...
To clarify, it was Wizards of the Coast who laid off a lot of employees lately, not the Pokemon company.
Okay, I don't know the difference, Dan. Do you want to clarify? I don't say Wizards of the Coast because I in my mind I think about that was a company that existed many, many years ago, and so I think of Pokemon as more today. What do I miss in all that understanding?
Wizards of the Coast, they are still going as a company. They're the company that made Magic the Gathering, amongst other things. They originally had the license to release Pokemon in the US, like basically outside of Japan. So they released the sets from base set up to Skyridge. At that point, the license didn't get renewed because they were mishandling the organized play side is one of the big deals about it. And that's when it moved to Nintendo, Pokemon USA, then the Pokemon Company International have released it since then. But the pre-release Raichus were owned by Wizards of the Coast employees. Now, some of those Wizards of the Coast employees did move over to Pokemon, Nintendo, etc. over the years. Like, I know the second one that you bought was from someone who now worked at TPCI. But the story that is going around on this latest pre-release Raichu is that it was someone from Wizards of the Coast who had worked there since the 90s, since they were printing Pokemon. It's been highly publicized the last couple of years. Wizards of the Coast have laid off a ton of employees.
Okay.
So it's someone from Wizards of the Coast. I'll say, the person who told me about it told me not to tell anyone, but then I found out that you had been told about this from a completely different source, so that's why I'm okay mentioning this one. Yeah,
the only thing I wanted to say was it's a surprise. I will say to everybody watching, just because it came from someone in that role doesn't mean it's authentic. We have to understand that somebody in a role like that for this many years could certainly have had access to be able to take any card like this and then stamp it. I am not suggesting that was done. I just, as we talk about true authentication, we have to understand what can and cannot happen. And I want to point out, because somebody might be interested and said, David, does that worry you? How does that make you feel about that card? And Rusty once said to me, which this is the reason I get to all this, is he said to me, David, I wouldn't have any problem if more of those came out, only because it creates even more legitimacy around the copies that we own. And that was the narrative all the way back, right? The narrative for this card was there's roughly 10 or 11 that were produced in some fashion as errors. We're kind of just walked down a hallway and said, here, you can have this one, you have this one, here's a little token, enjoy. And then these folks either put it away, destroyed it, or whatever. So we really don't know how many are still out there, aren't, and we don't know if this one will ever come out, if it's authentic or whatever. But it's interesting to hear of the fact that whenever, I'll tell you what, it resonates with me, because I get these messages on my Instagram all the time. And somebody will say this: I'm a Turtwig collector, and I will never be able to own that card that you just sold. And that makes me sad because it's too much money and whatever. And I say, you know what? Don't ever think that way. Believe it, dream it, save for it. And when it comes out there, because it will invariably, even if it means somebody comes out there and resells it on the market one day, someone that owns it right now, people's situations change. You have to believe you're going to acquire it. And that's how I've had to stay optimistic over all these years, especially with the trophy cards and the World Championship cards and all the rest of it. So just when you think nothing else is going to come out, you never know. And so keep that in mind. You guys can always, for more information, you're welcome to DM me on any of this stuff. But I just, again, a kind of a surprise thing that was, that's being passed around and said to be very quiet, and yet it's being passed around to everybody. So
yeah. Just want to say, I think we're going to talk about the card show soon. I just want to say, because you mentioned you had a lot of messages from people who were really nice about the collection stuff. One of the biggest messages I've got a lot of times is there a way to preserve your collection digitally so that there is a record of all of these cards, all of these weird variants, so that they don't just disappear and there's no record? I just want to let you know, we're in the early stages, but I have been in touch with someone who is an archivist, you know what I mean? Someone who does professional archiving.
Wait a minute. All of a sudden, 1,000 Coffee Talks podcasts in, you're going to worry about the pronunciation of a word, you UK fool? What are you thinking?
Because I don't know if that's
archivist.
I don't know if that's a UK thing.
Normally,
I don't know if that's a UK thing. I might just be pronouncing the word wrong because I've maybe only seen it written down. But we have been in preliminary talks with someone. If the collection sells, either the trophies or if the rest of the stuff sells, before it leaves David's place, we're going to get someone in who, like I say, has a lot of experience in handling and archiving digital copies of documents, that kind of thing. We're going to make sure that stuff is preserved. We're going to make sure that there is a record of all of these weird variants. There's a record of like high quality images or scans of stuff. We're going to make sure that that happens. I just want to put people's minds at ease because so many people have asked me about that, because that was a big thing for me. What the biggest thing I love about your collection is the fact that it's I have access to it more than other people do, but it's a resource as much as it is a collection. It's a historical thing where I've been saying I'm going to make this video for months, but I'm still trying to work on it because I'm trying to buy some cards for it to finish it off. But there's stuff going on. There's some stuff with EX era theme decks that I'm looking into, which if you weren't obsessive and didn't put EX era theme decks all together in a binder labeled as theme deck, this is a project that would never get done, and likely there's extra variants in them. I'll say that. I'll talk about it more, but in videos and stuff. But there's extra variants that just would have been lost to time. Like, no one would have known about these because the people who are now buying EX era theme decks aren't opening them. The ones that are opened have been pulled apart. They've gone to different places. Even if people spot these variants, it's much harder to track where they actually came from. And the other thing for me is I always obviously loved you having the collection because it always reassured to me there's always at least one copy of this card still in existence. Because I collect a lot of like dead CCGs and all these older card games. You look at stuff and it's like, oh, we're talking about supply and demand. It's like there's probably 4 of us in the world who would ever want whatever this card is, and maybe none of us want to pay more than $100 for it, but they might be gone. There's stuff like that where if people didn't care enough to collect stuff, there's stuff that just might be gone forever. And so it was always nice knowing that there was no English Pokemon card gone forever. Every copy gone because you always had it. And that's one of the big things where I'm going to make sure that we do get everything properly documented, archived, set up with someone to make sure that this is going to be about so that people can see it in future.
You know, it's why I always said, Dan, and people have always thought I'm completely and utterly crazy, but it's why I've always said I felt it was an obligation, right? Since I bought the first collection back in 2004 and I was able to leverage that into so many other things and understood what I had that was so special. And then I began pursuing after that. It's why I've always said the same thing, that I felt it to be an obligation. And that's why it's so agonizing at this point to try to look at possibly selling it. But, you know, it's been many, many, many years. And sometimes the time just comes for myriad of different reasons. I will say to you, I think you're completely off your rocker. And I just want to put that out there on the record. So this will always be memorialized as well. I don't know why Dan thinks, guys, that he can just say, well, we're going to bring in the archivist, the archival guy, because it's my place, my house, and my collection. I keep saying, Dan, what are you going to do for me? And he says, I don't got to do nothing for you. Like I did enough for you. So Dan, I want it on public record that if I don't pay you a penny when all this stuff sells, if it all sells, if we're blessed enough that somebody actually wants to continue on this legacy, then your role and ability to archive is going to be part of your compensation because I'm not getting nothing from it except time wasting in my house when I could be eating pizza. Speaking of which, Dan, I do want to say, because I haven't had pizza today, and you guys that have followed me, anybody still watching is actually like Steven and about 2 others. Thank you. So I'm on day 15. Yeah, I'm on day 15 today, guys. No fat for 14 in some days. So no pizza, but Dan's not offering me pizza to do this anyway. So good luck with that, Dan. Thank you for being selfish with your archiving.
Oh, the archiving guy, archivist, who has said he is willing to help you and your wife digitize some of your photo albums when he comes. Because
okay,
that's
I don't want to
something
talk
that you
about
asked
it.
for.
All right, fine.
That's the thing that you asked for is something for you if he comes over.
You made me because you didn't come with any reasonable offer. I'm so tired of this one-sided relationship, but I'd like to know you got schooled in economics. Dan, I promised you I can't leave you out of everything. Would you please tell our audience about what happened at the card show that you went to last weekend?
It went all right. It was a decent show. Cleared out a couple of bigger items, which was really nice. There was a couple of 4-figure sales, which took up that was the bulk of the sales during the day. Like I write down all the sales that we make, and it was pages and pages of it, but there was like 2 sales at the top, which were like 80-90% of the money I brought in because everything else was just dollar singles and $5 for 2 pre-release decks or whatever. But we're not doing the next show, I don't think, 'cause the next one is a big jumbo show. I think we talked about that because I didn't know what I was doing with the stuff that I've got left over. And I think our plan is to list some of it online for sale now, mainly to get some money for Worlds, because, you know, there's a Pokemon Center at Worlds, and Logo's crazy in the Pokemon Center, and then we're going to Disneyland for 4 days, and Logo's crazy in the stores at Disney, so we'll be doing that. So I mean, keep an eye out on my Instagram for people who want to buy some Pokemon stuff. Another one is a lot of the like old world stuff, like playmat sleeves, whatever. We're just trying to sell to get rid of them, basically, have some more room. But show was decent. I think we are probably going to still do more shows in the future. Just trying to eliminate some of the stock now. I think part of it is if we can get a lot of the like bulkier, cheap stuff out the way, I can maybe even drop down to one table in future and just have just cards, which I think I'd maybe prefer that, because I think it's the shows are now turning more towards that audience of people are buying cards. Then they're not the players who are buying sleeves or anything anymore. It's the people are coming to fill out collections, or they're trying to do good bulk buys from other vendors for swap out stuff that they have that they don't, that kind of thing. So that's where I'm going to push more towards in the future. I think I will list some of the higher end cards on Instagram probably, but it's going to be other items. I think is going to be what we're trying to get rid of.
I think one thing you can do, Dan, is just a suggestion is you could make a video on things that you have for sale, and I'd be glad to publicize it on my channel and push people over. I will say I'm only going to do that if the stuff is priced reasonably. And I don't mean that in any negative way. I just mean that everybody sells everything and everybody's trying to get too much for everything. So if there were a situation that you said, hey, I want to get rid of these sleeves, I want to get rid of these mats, I want to create some stuff, and I'm going to show them in a video, in a 15 or 20 minute video, and just quickly go through, this is a really good price, a really good deal, anybody, reach out. That would be a way to try to leverage maybe some of my followers if that could help you in making some great deals for people and trying to grab some capital for you towards Worlds. So just something to think about. It's what I do with my Instagram when I'm saying, here's a championship card that everybody sells for 200 and I'm selling it for 100 or 150 or whatever it is. So just an idea, because you're very good at the podcasting. And so, it'd be just showing items and saying, hey, this is what we got. And you guys get a hold of me so that they could actually see it. And sometimes visualizing something becomes really good and in the moment, and a little bit of a story behind it will attract people who I found in the last months or two, people have really been saying, you know what, David, the stories resonate with me so much. So sometimes you tell a story about where something came from and they're like, yeah, I really would like to have that because of that story as well.
Yeah, all the stuff will be put here like reasonable prices, for like below market, below whatever stuff sells for on eBay is where we'd be at with it. So
yeah,
I'll let you know about that. We have a lot of things coming up to we have going on, because this weekend Laura's got, I don't actually have much this weekend, but Laura's got the last chance qualifier for the Columbus Invitational that we've been talking about. The weekend after that is the NAIC. We're going to the wedding, so I've got wedding on Saturday and then theme park / calling you and Ruben on Sunday to try and help you buy cards to fill out your collection that we still need to fill out, even if you're not going to keep it forever. We need to fill it out. And then not long after that, I'm going to come to your place for a week or two and deal with stuff there. But I'll get stuff sorted before Worlds and get it all posted and sold. That'll be fine.
Cool.
There'll be videos. Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you for watching as usual. Dan, I suggest, because I'll forget to tell you later, I'm going to say it right now, I think it would be helpful in this one. You might want to consider putting a table of contents in, since there was, the first segment about demand and then the pieced up to my collection. And then we went on to the next two. So
yeah, I'll throw it in the description so people can see.
Yeah, that would be helpful in case people just want to go there. But I appreciate all you guys as always. Thanks for checking in for the updates. This is a good podcast, and hope you guys enjoy it. Again, it's just real talk about Pokemon stuff, and it's not the drama and it's not the rest of it, but it makes a difference, and especially for Dan. So if you guys are tell a friend. That's what I always say. Please tell a friend. But thank you so much for watching and for all your support.
Yeah, we love it. We love you guys. And maybe we'll be back tomorrow. I don't know. We'll see what we're doing tomorrow in terms of recording. But we'll be back soon, either way. Goodbye.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Koffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person, with music by More Than Never and artwork by Lore Norton. A special thanks to all our Patreon members. Join us again next time.
But they don't want you to.